Hi. When it comes to Arnold Schwarzenegger, he is very well known for action films. And during the late 80s and the early 90s, he was probably the most infamous actor that played an action hero in many of his films. Actually, if you look back to the late 80s and early 90s, there was a major change in cinema and there was a focus on action films. Plenty of actors who rose during that period include Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, and Jean-Claude Van Damme, to name a few. But at the end of the day, it was Arnold who took Hollywood by a storm and was the most influential in cinema when it comes to action films. If we look through his career, he did start in many action films, but he also tried to tackle comedy, and to a certain extent, he also tried to expose himself to sort of the drama genre. And this is where we come to the 2015 film Maggie, starring the one and only Arnold Schwarzenegger. With him is a relatively less known actress. Her name is Abigail. She's actually well known as a child actress. She started way back in 2002, where she starred in Signs alongside Mel Gibson. She also starred in a number of films as a child actress, portraying a child character. Probably one of the well-known films of hers is Nim's Island, with Gerard Butler and Judy Foster. In Maggie, however, she plays the teenage daughter of Arnold's character, set in a post-apocalyptic world where there is a virus outbreak turning people into zombies. Again, I believe the zombie genre has been utilized and overused in recent years, specifically after the success of the Walking Dead series. Now, if we look at the IMDb webpage of Maggie, it states that it's a horror slash drama. I believe it's more of a drama, to be honest, and that's why I thought Arnold took this role, because he wanted to, as I mentioned, explore his dramatic abilities in terms of acting. There is some very minor element of horror, but I don't think it should be classified as a horror at all. There are no intense frightening scenes except for a very few. However, the general atmosphere of the film is that of gloom and doom, very dark drama.
Dad! I need you to follow the rules here. Quarantine is 8 weeks in. She's probably going to show more signs of aggression and hunger. When that happens, say your goodbyes and get her straight to quarantine.
As we go through the film, it tackles how, as a father, Arnold's character deals with the infection of his teenage daughter, who gets infected with this deadly virus and slowly starts to progress into turning into finally a zombie. What I like about this film is that, again, it does tackle drama in particular. And if we look and take a closer look, I think it does tackle the element of grief. Basically, the father here is grieving for his daughter. Now, all of us must have went through some form of grief in our lives, either through a loss of a close relative, a very close friend. And sometimes, by the way, grief isn't just about losing an individual. Sometimes even losing, for example, a job or losing a house. And sometimes even financial losses can lead to grief. Basically, grief is an emotional response to any loss. But of course, it's very well known that grief particularly happens during a loss of an individual, as someone who is close to you. And again, the loss doesn't necessarily mean death. There are griefs that happened due to an illness. And in this particular film, Arnold's character is grieving for his daughter who basically developed this deadly infection. So she is slowly turning. And I think this is probably the worst type of griefs, is where you still haven't lost the individual, but you are seeing him as he's slowly progressing into death. And I think that's one of the worst types of griefs. Now, if we look closely at grief in psychology, grief is usually happens within a cycle, or there are stages of grief. Usually starts with the shock and denial, then guilt and pain. Then after that, there's anger, bargaining about the loss, which eventually leads to depression, sadness, feeling the loss, and then slowly a person can come out of the grief and accepts it. And this is where it's tricky. A lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, and even individuals believe that grief is actually depression. Now, they're both very, very similar, but they are different. Grief is somewhat a normal reaction of an individual to a loss. It can lead to pathological grief, which is basically depression. And that's when the level of functioning is beyond what is expected from a normal grief. A person basically loses complete functioning, feels guilt, he starts to have self-harm thoughts, extreme guilt to the extent that he wants to, for example, end his life, and his level of functioning is completely deteriorated. And that's when we say this is depression, and further intervention is required. So back to Maggie. Arnold's character is, I believe, in this film is going through the denial phase. Yes, he knows that his daughter is infected and she's slowly turning, but he's still in denial and can't accept that slowly she has to be dealt with. And that's where the core of the film is focused on. How does this father deal with the loss of his daughter, who is slowly dying and turning into a zombie? Now, of course, in the film, family members, at the end of the day, when their infected family member is turning into a zombie, they have to eliminate them. So would a father be able to eliminate his dying daughter or turning daughter into a zombie? That's where the main focus of the film is. Now, back to the film. Arnold, as I mentioned, is very well known for his action films. He is fantastic in that. We've seen him in so many fantastic films: Terminator, Predator, Last Action Hero, to name a few. And here, as I mentioned, he's tried to explore his dramatic abilities. I think he did a decent job, but still, Arnold is still defined with his action abilities, and I was still impressed with his performance here. The issue is not about his performance, but the issue is about the pace of the film. It has to be said, it's very, very slow. Like, I'm talking like so slow that at certain points I got to some extent bored, because there are no events happening, no action happening. We're just seeing them dealing with their emotions. Yes, there's good performances, but again, if you don't have a good pace and good writing in a scenario, usually the movie loses its strength. Now, Abigail, playing the daughter, did also an awesome job. I thought she did very well as someone who's sick and also grieving in her own way that she's infected, that she's about to die, and she's sort of between denial and bargaining when it comes to stages of grief. And I thought she pulled it off very well. But again, not the best of Arnold films, not one of the most recommended films. Usually, when I do a review of a film, I highly recommend this film. In this case, I would only recommend Maggie for those who are die-hard fans of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who wants to see him in a different type of role. Again, I love Arnold. He's very charismatic. I love his accent. I think it always attracts the viewer. And again, here he does a very tremendous job. I liked him here, but the movie itself, in my opinion, didn't work out. However, it did explore grief, which was also nice from a psychological point of view.